Hello and welcome. Before we begin, I invite you to make yourself as comfortable as possible. Find a cozy position, allow your body to settle, and if you can, dim the lights around you so the atmosphere feels calm and restful. I'd love to know more about you, so when you're able, please write in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these videos can travel, and I'm genuinely curious about the places and times where you join me. If you find this video soothing, please remember to like it and subscribe. That's in collection helps the video reach others who might also need some rest tonight. My true wish is that you don't make it to the end of this video, because somewhere along the way, you drifted off into peaceful sleep. That would be the best outcome of all. And if there are other topics you'd like me to create future videos about, please feel free to suggest them in the comments. I want this space to be one where you feel listened to and cared for. Now, let's begin. Tonight, we begin a journey into history, faith, and memory. A journey that may surprise you with how much Christianity and Islam hold in common. Often, when we think of religions, we imagine differences first. The lines that divide, the doctrines that separate, the rituals that distinguish one path from another. Yet if we pause, if we take a slower look, a gentler look, we begin to see something remarkable. We see not only echoes, but entire stories, entire families that live side by side in both traditions. The Qur'an and the Bible, two sacred texts, share more characters than most people realize. They're not strangers to each other. Instead, they are like relatives, cousins who grew up in different households, remembering the same ancestors in slightly different ways. As we drift into this exploration, imagine sitting in a quiet room where voices from long ago speak again, softly, telling their stories. At the heart of Islam is the belief that God, known as Allah in Arabic, is the same God who spoke to Abraham, who guided Moses, and who blessed Mary with a miraculous child. For Muslims, these figures are not foreign, nor distant. They are prophets and righteous ones, woven into the very heart of their faith. And for Christians, these names are familiar too. They live in hymns and prayers, in stained glass windows, in Sunday sermons. When you place the two traditions side by side, a sense of kinship appears. Jesus is there. Mary is there. Abraham is there. Moses, Noah, David, Solomon, they are all present, alive, in both stories. But there is also something more tender, something that feels almost like family. In Islam, these figures are remembered not as outsiders, but as honored relatives. Muslims speak of Jesus not as a stranger, but as Isa, the Messiah. They revere Mary, or Maryam, more times in their scripture than even the New Testament does. They trace their lineage through Abraham, just as Christians and Jews do. For this reason, our journey tonight will not move simply through history in a straight line. Instead, we will walk through families, groups of names connected by blood, by lineage, and by destiny. Because faith, at its deepest root, is also about family. It is about parents and children, ancestors and descendants, each one carrying forward a story that began before them. We will meet the family of Mary and Jesus, tender and miraculous, joined with the relatives Zechariah and John. We will meet the family of Abraham, the patriarch whose two sons, Isaac and Ishmael, became two great branches of humanity's spiritual tree. We will sit with David and Solomon, kings who ruled with wisdom and songs, remembered both as rulers and as prophets. We will cross the desert with Moses and Aaron, brothers who stood before the Pharaoh, voices trembling but resolute, carrying God's command. And we will reach even further back to Noah. Each family will open a door, inviting us to see not only the differences, but the deep harmony that exists between these two great faiths. Why tell these stories now? Perhaps because in our world, we are often told that Islam and Christianity are strangers, even opponents. The news speaks of conflict. History reminds us of wars. And yet, the scriptures whisper something far older, something gentler, that these two traditions are branches of the same ancient tree, nourished by the same roots. There is peace in remembering this, a peace that does not erase differences, but that recognizes the human longing for connection, meaning, and love. For those listening tonight, let this remembrance bring rest. Imagine the great figures of faith, not standing apart, but standing together. Imagine Mary and Maryam, one and the same woman, honored by 2 billion Christians and nearly 2 billion Muslims alike. Imagine Ibrahim, loved across continents, called the friend of God in both traditions. Imagine Moses, known in both texts, guiding his people through waters of hardship into shores of hope. This is not just history. It is a lullaby of shared memory. Tonight, as we move from family to family, story to story, you are invited to rest in the knowledge that humanity is not as divided as we sometimes believe. That beyond walls and borders, we share names, prayers, and stories. So let us begin slowly, gently, with the first family: Mary, Jesus, Zechariah, and John. A family at the heart of both Christianity and Islam. Our first family begins with a woman honored in Islam above almost all others. Her name is Maryam. In the Qur'an, an entire chapter bears her name, Surat Maryam. No other woman is given such a distinction. She is remembered not only as the mother of a prophet, but as a sign of God's power and mercy. For Muslims, Maryam is the model of purity, devotion, and unwavering faith. Her story begins quietly with her birth, dedicated to God even before she could walk. Raised within the sanctuary, she was cared for by the prophet Zechariah, known in the Bible as Zechariah. Under his care, Maryam grew in worship, secluded yet radiant, visited by angels, surrounded by provisions that seemed to appear from the unseen. When Zechariah would enter her chamber, he would find fruits out of season, foods no one had brought. And when he asked her where these came from, she would simply answer, "It is from Allah. Allah provides to whom He wills, without measure." Witnessing Maryam's devotion stirs something deep in Zechariah. He was old, his wife barren, and yet he longed for a child who might continue the line of prophets, who might guide the people after him. So, in the stillness of the sanctuary, he prayed, "My Lord, grant me from yourself a good offspring. Indeed, you are the hearer of prayers." And it was then that the angels came with good news. Despite his age, despite his wife's barrenness, he would be granted a son. His name would be Yahya, known in Christianity as John the Baptist. A noble prophet, pure, devoted, never disobedient to God. Yahya's birth was a miracle of hope, a reminder that nothing is impossible when God wills it. But a greater miracle was yet to come. Maryam, in her solitude, was visited by an angel. In Islam, it was the mighty Gabriel. Gabriel himself. He appeared to her in human form, startling her with his sudden presence. She said, frightened, "Indeed, I seek refuge in the Most Merciful from you, if you fear Allah." But the angel reassured her, "I am only a messenger of your Lord, to grant you a pure boy." Confused, Maryam asked, "How can I have a son when no man has touched me, and I have not been unchaste?" And Gabriel answered, "So it will be. Your Lord says, 'It is easy for me. We will make him a sign to the people and a mercy from us. And it is a matter already decreed.'" Thus, Maryam conceived Isa, Jesus in Christianity, known in Islam as a prophet and Messiah, though not divine. His birth was a miracle, a child brought into the world with the will of God alone, without father, just as Adam had once been created from dust. Maryam withdrew from her people, carrying the child in secret. When the pains of childbirth overtook her, she came to the trunk of a palm tree, alone and in anguish. "Oh, I wish I had died before this and was in oblivion, forgotten," she cried. But then she heard a voice of comfort. Some say, from Gabriel, others, from the infant himself. The voice told her, "Do not grieve. Your Lord has provided beneath you a stream, and shake the trunk of the palm tree. Fresh, ripe dates will fall upon you. So drink, and be comforted." So Maryam gave birth, sustained by water and dates, a sacred bearing still honored in Muslim cultures today. When she returned to her people, carrying the child, they were shocked. They accused her of wrongdoing, forgetting her lifelong devotion. But Maryam, obeying God's command, did not answer them. Instead, she pointed to the infant. And then, in one of the most remarkable moments in Islamic tradition, the newborn, Isa, spoke. He said, "Indeed, I am the servant of Allah. He has given me the scripture and made me a prophet. He has blessed me wherever I am, and has enjoined upon me prayer and charity as long as I live. And dutiful to my mother, he has not made me arrogant, unblessed. Peace be upon me the day I was born, the day I will die, and the day I will be raised alive." The people fell silent. A miracle had unfolded before their eyes. The family, Maryam, Isa, Zachariah, and Yahya, forms a circle of kinship remembered tenderly in Islam. Maryam is honored as the purest of women. Isa is revered as Messiah, miracle worker, prophet, and sign of God. Zachariah is remembered as the devoted guardian who believed in miracles. Yahya is seen as the noble prophet who called his people back to righteousness. Together, they embody faith, hope, and trust in God's mercy. And there is another detail worth remembering. In Islam, Maryam and the mother of Yahya are understood to be related, making Isa and Yahya cousins, just as the Gospels describe. The ties of family extend across the Qur'an and the Bible, binding the stories closer than we might expect. Close your eyes and imagine a desert sky, wide and endless, scattered with stars. It is under such a sky that the story of Abraham unfolds. A man of unshakable faith, called the friend of God. He stands as a patriarch for Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. But in Islam, his legacy is remembered most vividly through his family, for through them, two great streams of faith began to flow. Abraham had two sons, Ismail and Ishaq. Ismail was the firstborn, born of Hajar, who, in Islamic tradition, was not a slave woman, but a noble wife chosen by God to bear Abraham's son. At God's command, Abraham left Hajar and the infant Ismail in the barren valley that would one day become Makkah, with no crops, no river, and no human soul in sight. Hajar ran desperately between the two hills of Safa and Marwa in search of water, a ritual still remembered in the Muslim pilgrimage, the Hajj. Her prayers were answered when the spring of Zamzam gushed forth from the ground at the feet of her son. Thus, Ismail grew up in the desert, among the Arab tribes who came to settle near the miraculous spring. He learned their tongue, married among them, and became the forefather of the Arab people. From his line, centuries later, would come the Prophet Muhammad. Ishaq, the younger son, was born to Sarah, Ibrahim's first wife, in her old age. His birth, too, was miraculous, a joy that seemed impossible. The Qur'an recounts that when angels told Sarah she would bear a son, she laughed in amazement. Yet God's promise was fulfilled. Ishaq grew up in the land of Canaan, the land of promise, where his descendants became the children of Israel, the line that would bring forth prophets like Yaqub, Musa, Harun, Daud, Sulaiman, and finally, Isa ibn Maryam, known as Jesus, son of Mary. So it was that one father, Ibrahim, became the root of two great families. From Ismail, the Arab lineage and the message of Islam. From Ishaq, the Israelite lineage and the messages carried by so many prophets of the Bible. The Qur'an is careful to emphasize that both sons were chosen and blessed, though history would take them in different directions. Over time, the two families grew apart. Ishmael's descendants built their lives in the harsh deserts of Arabia, poets of the sands and guardians of the Kaaba, the sacred house of God, rebuilt by Abraham and Ismail together. Ishaq's descendants, meanwhile, built kingdoms and temples in Canaan, receiving the Torah, the Psalms, and the wisdom of prophets who shaped the spiritual heritage of the Israelites. And so, from the same Father, two lines carried forward the same message: the worship of one God. Their separation was not born of hatred, but of geography, culture, and destiny. One faith, split into two living traditions, both still bound by the memory of their ancestor, Abraham. When Muslims pray, they honor this shared heritage. The daily prayer includes these words: O God, bless Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, as you blessed Abraham and the family of Abraham. It is a reminder that at the root of it all, the family of Abraham is one family, and that the story of humanity's faith cannot be told without both Ismail and Ishaq. So, as the desert wind blows across Arabia and the olive trees sway in Canaan, the memory of two brothers endures. Their path diverged, but their hearts forever tied to the same God. In the gentle silence of the night, let us turn our attention to two of the most celebrated figures of both the Bible and the Qur'an. Dawood, known in Christianity as David, and his son Sulaiman, known as Solomon. In the Christian tradition, David is remembered as the shepherd boy who became king, the slayer of Goliath, and the author of the Psalms. Islam remembers him too, but with a perspective shaped by reverence for his role as both prophet and king. In the Qur'an, the wood is given the gift of a beautiful voice. His recitation of the Zabur, the Psalms, was so moving that the very mountains and birds were said to join him in praise. When he ruled, he was not only a sovereign, but a judge of wisdom and justice, guided by God to discern truth from falsehood. His son, Sulaiman, carried that legacy even further. In the Bible, Solomon is the wise king who built the Temple of Jerusalem and judged disputes with unmatched fairness. In Islam, he is remembered with awe as a prophet granted unique gifts. He could speak to the animals and even command the wind and the jinn. The Qur'an tells of flocks of birds gathering to obey his word, of armies that included not only men, but beings of another realm, and of a king whose power stretched across lands. Yet, despite such power, his greatest gift was still his wisdom, the wisdom to lead, to decide, to keep balance in a vast kingdom. One famous episode told in both traditions is the story of the Queen of Sheba, known as Bilqis. She came to test him with riddles and treasures, how she found not only wealth, but also faith. For when she stood in Solomon's court, she recognized the power of the one God that guided him. In the larger story of faith, David and Solomon remind us of how prophets were not always wandering ascetics or martyrs. Sometimes they were kings, wearing crowns yet robes, yet still servants of God. They represent the union of spiritual guidance with worldly power, a balance rarely achieved in human history. Their reigns are remembered as golden ages, when justice and faith walked hand in hand. For Muslims, these figures connect directly back to Abraham. Daud and Suleiman are part of the same prophetic chain, links in the story that flows from Abraham through Ishak and Jacob all the way to Isa or Jesus. They form the royal line that leads to Christ, and in both traditions, their stories are not merely tales of the past, but reminders that leadership without justice is hollow, and power without wisdom is fleeting. So, as the night deepens and the mind drifts, picture the hills of ancient Jerusalem, the songs of David echoing across stone walls, and the mighty court of Solomon, where birds took flight at his command. These are stories not for division, but of shared memory, treasured alike in church and mosque, carried in the hearts of two great faiths. Among the most enduring figures remembered in both Christianity and Islam is the prophet Moses, known to Christians and Jews as Moses. His story is one of trials and deliverance, of a people's struggle for freedom, and of God's guidance through a desert wilderness. In the Qur'an, Moses is mentioned more than any other prophet. His life begins in peril, just as it does in the Bible. The Pharaoh, ruler of Egypt, feared the growing strength of the Israelites and ordered the killing of their newborn sons. To save her child, the mother of Moses placed him in a basket and set him afloat upon the Nile. By divine will, the infant was found by the Pharaoh's household and raised within the palace walls. Thus, the boy who would later challenge the Pharaoh was raised under his very roof. In time, Moses discovered his true identity as a son of Israel. A moment of conflict forced him to flee Egypt, and in exile, in the quiet land of Midian, he began his life anew. It was there, beside a humble burning bush, that he received God's command. He was chosen to return, to confront the Pharaoh, and to lead his people toward freedom. Yet, he did not walk this path alone. His brother, Harun, or Aaron, was sent with him, a companion in speech and a support in courage. Together, they stood before the mighty Pharaoh and delivered the call of God. Let my people go. The Qur'an and the Bible both describe the confrontation that followed. Signs and plagues, miracles and refusals, until finally, the Pharaoh's arrogance led to his downfall, and the sea opened to make a path for the children of Israel. For Muslims, the crossing of the sea is not merely a moment of escape, but a timeless reminder of God's mercy and power. The Qur'an paints the scene in vivid strokes. Walls of water standing firm. The path of dry land beneath trembling feet. And the believers carried to safety while the Pharaoh and his armies were engulfed. But the story of Musa does not end at the sea. His journey with the Israelites continued into the wilderness, where faith was tested again and again. At Mount Sinai, he received the revelation, the Torah, or Torah, laws and guidance for his people. Yet, when he returned from the mountain, he found them wavering, their faith fragile, their hearts restless. These struggles are recorded in both traditions, a reminder that freedom does not end with deliverance, but must be nurtured with patience and obedience. Islam honors Musa as one of the greatest prophets, a messenger who bore immense trials and stood firm. His closeness to God was such that he is described as the one to whom God spoke directly. Harun, too, is remembered not just as a helper, but as a prophet in his own right, entrusted with guiding the people when Musa ascended the mountain. Christians remember Moses as the great lawgiver and liberator, whose leadership set the foundation of their faith. Muslims honor him as one of the 5 greatest messengers, alongside Noah, Ibrahim, Isa, and Muhammad. His story forms a bridge between traditions, a narrative so central that it is impossible to imagine the history of either faith without him. As you listen to this tale, in the quiet of the night, imagine the desert winds sweeping across endless sands, the flicker of fire on a mountaintop, and the thunder of parted seas. These are not simply scenes from distant history, but shared memories carried in sacred words. The story of Musa and Harun binds together believers across centuries, whispering of freedom, of struggle, and of the steadfastness required to walk in faith. Long before the time of Abraham, before the tribes of Israel, and even before the rise of nations, there lived a prophet who stood almost alone in his world. His name was Noah, known to Christians as Noah. Both the Bible and the Qur'an remember him as a man of extraordinary patience who called his people for years upon years, urging them to turn away from corruption and return to the worship of the one God. The Qur'an describes his struggle with striking intensity. For centuries, Nuh spoke to his people in public gatherings, in the quiet of night, in the open fields, and in the privacy of their homes. His words were simple, yet heavy with truth. Worship God. You have no other duty but Him. Yet the people laughed at him, turned away from him, and ridiculed his persistence. Even members of his own household doubted him. In the Bible, Noah too is remembered as righteous in a time of wickedness. Both traditions agree. While the people around him sank into disbelief and corruption, Noah remained faithful, steadfast and unshaken in his trust. Finally, the divine command came. Noah was instructed to build a great vessel, an ark, far from any sea, on dry land. His neighbors mocked him as the wooden beams rose higher, as the hammering echoed day after day. "What need is there for a ship in the dust of the earth?" they jeered. But Noah carried on, guided by a vision they could not see. When the appointed time arrived, the signs became clear. From every corner of creation, pairs of animals came forth, guided by the unseen hand of God. And Noah's family, those who believed, gathered toward the vessel. Yet, here the story carries a detail in the Qur'an that pierces with sorrow. One of Noah's own sons refused to enter. He believed he could climb to the mountaintops and escape the flood. Noah pleaded with him, calling, "O my son, come aboard with us, and do not be among the disbelievers." But the young man turned away, and when the waters surged, he was lost to the waves. The flood came with overwhelming force. The heavens poured down torrents of rain, and the earth gushed forth from its depths. Waters rose and joined until the world became a vast sea. In the Bible, the flood lasted 40 days and nights. In the Qur'an, the description is one of universality, a judgment upon a people who had denied their prophet for too long. Inside the ark, Noah and his companions waited in silence as the vessel swayed upon the endless waters. Imagine the creaking of wood, the cries of animals, the low prayers whispered by trembling hearts. Outside, the world was being washed clean. When the waters at last receded, the ark came to rest upon a mountain, Mount Judy, as the Qur'an names it, or Ararat, as the Bible recalls. The survivors stepped out into a renewed earth. From them would grow new generations. For Muslims, Nuh is not only the builder of the ark, but one of the earliest great messengers, a prophet who persevered for centuries in the face of rejection. His patience is an enduring lesson. In Christianity, too, Noah stands as a symbol of obedience and faith, a man who trusted God when all the world doubted. His family, those who believed and endured with him, became the seeds of humanity after the flood. In this way, every nation is connected back to him, and his story belongs to all. As you let these stories settle, imagine the gentle rocking of the ark upon calm waters after the storm, the quiet of a world washed clean, and the hopeful eyes of those stepping onto new soil. The story of Noah is not only about judgment and loss. It is also about renewal, about second chances, and about the mercy that follows hardship. You see, the great religions of the world share the same people. The figures who shaped the stories of Christianity are also remembered with reverence in Islam. They walk across both traditions like bridges, uniting histories that, at first glance, may appear so different. We began with Isa, Jesus, and his mother, Maryam, whose purity and devotion remain a beacon in both faiths. Alongside them stood Zachariah and Yahya, Zachariah and John, a family of prophets bound by faith and sacrifice. Then we looked to Abraham, whose two sons, Ishmael and Ishak, carried forward lineages that would one day flower into Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Through them, one family branched into two traditions, reminding us that division is born not from strangers, but from brothers. We remembered Dawood and Sulaiman, David and Solomon, kings and prophets whose wisdom shaped nations and whose sums and judgments continue to inspire. We turn farther back to Moses, the liberator of his people, whose staff split the sea and whose law laid foundations for generations. And we close with Noah, patient prophet of the ark, who endured mockery, yet remained faithful until the earth itself was cleansed. Each of these families belongs not only to one people, but to all who remember them. The Qur'an and the Bible may tell their stories in different rhythms, yet the melodies often intertwine. Perhaps that is the greater lesson. Beneath the names and languages, beneath centuries of interpretation, lies a shared heritage of human striving, of faith against odds, of mercy after hardship. So tonight, as you rest, let these stories settle in your heart. Think of the generations that came before, who prayed, who struggled, who hoped, and how their legacies still shape the way we see the world today. For in the end, whether you call him Isa or Jesus, Musa or Moses, Ibrahim or Abraham, they remind us of one truth, that we are more connected than we realize, bound together by the same stories, the same human longing, and the same Creator. And with that thought, may you drift gently into sleep, carried by the echoes of prophets whose voices still whisper across time.